Hello and welcome to World Insight, coming to you live from Beijing on CCTV News. I'm your host, Tania. On today's program, Italian voters have spoken a big no to constitutional reforms, prompting Prime Minister Matteo Renzi to step down. And U.S. President-elect Donald Trump's phone conversation with Taiwan's leader, a diplomatic misstep or a sign of policy change? We start today's show with the referendum in Italy. Italian voters decided in a referendum whether or not to amend the country's 1948 constitution. Local media showed no votes were at 59%. That votes in favor of the reforms were only 41%. Renzi said the turnout of about 67% exceeded all expectations. Supporters of the vote no took to the streets and piazzas in Rome and early Monday to celebrate their victory. With the big no in Italy's polls, the economic and political uncertainty sent markets into a tailspin. Italian Prime Minister Matteo Renzi has announced that he will resign. He made his decision as exit polls suggested a large defeat in the referendum on the cabinet-backed constitutional reforms.
Domani pomeriggio riunirò il Consiglio dei Ministri.
Tomorrow afternoon, I will call a cabinet meeting, and I will thank my colleagues for an extraordinary adventure. It has been a united, strong, and compact team. I will then go to the presidential palace, where I will tender my resignation to the president.
Many say Renzi's departure will likely plunge Italy into a new phase of political uncertainty and possible economic turmoil. The defeat is also believed to pave way for the fast development of populism in the country. Before our discussion, let's take a look at this.
Italian Prime Minister Matteo Renzi on Sunday asked for the power to change Italy. For him, the vote was a one-time opportunity to radically reform Italy's flawed institutions. Renzi has been campaigning that his reforms would streamline Parliament, speed up the cumbersome lawmaking process and bring political stability to Italy, which has seen 60 governments in the past 70 years. But an overwhelming majority of people who voted rejected his proposals.
I tried to convince several of my friends that were thinking to vote no, to vote yes, because I think that it's a way to change something. It's not the best reform, but it's a good start.
These reforms are not well done. Yes, we must have reforms, but it must be done well, intelligently.
All opposition parties had lined up against the reform, but the loudest voice in the no camp was this man, Beppe Grillo. A former comedian turned politician, Grillo leads the anti-establishment 5-Star movement, which hopes that this result will propel it to win the next election and re-evaluate Italy's relationship with Europe. Matteo Renzi, the young, energetic centre-left reformist who took office in 2014, staked his political career and the future of Italy on Sunday's referendum. And in the year that saw the British vote to leave the European Union and the Americans to elect Donald Trump, Italy became the latest domino to fall as anti-establishment voting gathers momentum around the world. Kate Parkinson, CCTV, Rome.
For more on the Italian referendum and its impact, join me in the Beijing studio, Wang Yiwei, director of the Institute of International Affairs at Renmin University. Meanwhile, joining us from Rome, we have Francesco Sisci, who is a psychologist and also author and columnist. In Brussels, Tania Marocchi, who is a policy analyst at the European Policy Center. Welcome to the three of you. First of all, Ms. Sisci, coming from Rome, help us to understand what do you think this vote is for? Is it vote against Mr. Renzi's administration? Is it about the unsatisfaction of the realities of the economy? Or is it a big no to the European Union?
I think the main thing in Italy, the feeling at least, is that many people voted against Renzi. This was the main thing. Most people didn't really understand what the referendum was about, didn't understand what the European Union was about, but they were deeply dissatisfied with the Renzi administration. So it's very difficult to know where will we go after that? Because, yes, no to Renzi, but then what?
Ms. Marocchi, coming from the Brussels perspective, what is this for, this vote? For no? No against whom and what?
I must say I agree also with my colleague. I don't think that this was a vote against Europe. Europe was not really part of the discussion. It was very much a vote against the Prime Minister, Mr. Renzi. This was clear. It was, I would say, a mistake from his part at the beginning to tie the result of the referendum to his position, since he said at the beginning that he would resign if a no vote would have won, and many of the anti-systemic parties and the populist parties, such as the Lega Nord and the Five Star Movement, were very successful, clearly, in campaigning against the Prime Minister. Right. Posters, slogans from these parties were clearly against Renzi and not against the constitutional reform. So even in their message, when they
okay,
Yes?
Mr. Shishi, what do you think? How would you compare this vote about the constitutional change in your country, Italy, vis-a-vis the Brexit vote inside the UK? Is it the same logic or very different circumstances?
No, I think there is something similar and there are some differences. There is a wave of dissatisfaction of the middle class towards the establishment. The middle class have been living better lives ever since World War II. But for the past years, I would say since 2008, there has been a dramatic drop in their living standards. And there's been a great dissatisfaction with whatever the governments have been doing. So this is one element. The other element is that, unfortunately, in Italy, Renzi didn't understand the popular mood, didn't get the popular mood. Most people were actually in favor of these constitutional reforms, but were against him personally. If he had taken a step back and said, you know, vote for the reforms, I don't take part in the referendum, I'm not part of the deal, I'm willing to step down whenever you want, whatever, we would have now the reforms, but anyway, we would not have Renzi because people are not satisfied with Renzi and his government.
Professor Wang in Beijing, what do you think about the discussion we just had earlier with these two European guests coming from China? How do you observe the situation over there in Italy? What is it about, really?
Firstly, I think referenda is very dangerous. It's a political gamble, particularly for the young politicians like David Cameron and Renzi, you know, who are difficult to manage this, make the consensus before have a referenda, so we should learn the lesson. Secondly, I think the world is very uncertainty. People predict that the only certainty is uncertainty. So people not worried about this referendum, but after that, if they have the referenda of the Italian exist, something like that. But it's not necessary, but people still can predict that will not happening.
Well, not Italy exit if there's another word like that, but certainly there's a Frexit because there's already a word similar being invented in France. Before we go there to talk about what is exactly going on with the European Union and its future, let's focus still on Italy. Ms. Marocchi, what do you think about the possibilities of a caretaking government from now on, or an early election? Do you see parties within Italy will be able to come to any consensus about these two possibilities? Briefly.
I think it's very difficult to make a forecast at the moment. We shall see what comes out from the meeting that Renzi will have with our President of the Republic, Mattarella, this afternoon. But I think that the best option and the most likely option is that we will have a technical government with somebody that is picked from the Democratic Party. Mr. Renzi in his speech gave a sense that he will be out, that in a way it will be to the forces that were, the political forces that were pushing for the no to take over from here. And I think it might be, but this is just speculation, that he's trying to gamble in a way and to see, because he presented himself in his speech as a sort of outsider. He said he is different from the political class, he stepped down, he takes responsibility, which is a message that I think resonates with Italian people, and that might give him some better chances if we were to go to early elections, because he could present himself as a viable alternative.
Well, Mr. Sicci, if I remember right, Prime Minister Renzi, before his resignation, already mentioned this is going to be the end of his political life. That's what he said in the exact quote. Is there still room for him to come back? Do you think, is he still going to be relevant in the Italian politics anymore?
Well, there could be some relevance, although it's very hard to see now what kind of relevance is there, will be there. I think there will be a caretaking government, because still there is no consensus about an electoral law. So we don't know how the Italians will vote. And so if we don't know how the Italians will vote, we don't know if and how Renzi will take part in the next elections, and we don't know what kind of role he will have. He's still very young, but what is very interesting is that a massive vote was against him, and many people who voted for the reforms despite him. His popularity in Italy is very, very low, and it will be very hard to climb up again.
Okay, I think at this moment the fate of Mr. Renzi and the fate of the next government is still honey in the air. But there are other things that are very important. With Professor Wang here in Beijing, that is, what does this say about the overall political environment inside the EU and also inside the Eurozone? Before you answer that question, sir, I want to point out a mix of information. This, of course, is a referendum against the change. Some say that is an indication of the upswing of the right in the European countries, including Italy. However, there's another result. Austria had its own election, and apparently it is not the far right that has got the favor. What do you think about this mixed signals coming now from the European continent? Immediate signals, of course, I'm talking about.
That means that we get not too pessimistic about the future. Even the
It
Brexit.
depends on what is pessimistic and what is optimistic you're talking about.
Even the Brexit, now the Supreme Court also say not necessary that we'll start the process next March. So maybe it's not finished the jobs. So
because the High Court inside the UK are also talking about a role for them to play.
Even the, I think regret for the referenda. Even in Italy, I think the Italy's constitution also limited the power for referenda to quit any international treaty, including the European Union. So not so much, pessimistic about after this referenda, maybe another referenda is coming, another Brexit. Not necessary.
Not necessary. Let me go to Mr. Sicci. What do you think?
Well, I think your point is very interesting, Austria. That I think it proves, and even the result in England, and in a way also the result in America with Trump, is that yes, there is a dissatisfaction of the middle class. But yes, if you address this dissatisfaction in the right way, as the Austrian did, well, you can still stem the tide you can channel this dissatisfaction in the right way. There is hope. It's not a necessary bad. The problem is that several candidates, in a way, for the right side, Cameron, Renzi, and in a way Hillary Clinton, misunderstood the mood of the people. They thought they were on the winning side when they were in fact on the losing side of history. So the problem, the great challenge of the reasonable politicians in Europe is to how to get the mood of the people and tell the people, okay, yes, there are problems, but we can do better, we can unite the country, and there is hope. This is a big hope, and on the one hand, but also a big challenge because it's very difficult. It's uncharted territories for politicians in Europe, and we will see this in Italy in the next few days, but most importantly in France in next spring, where there is a very, very big challenge.
As we said earlier about France, Marine Le Pen, of course, her National Front party congratulated the result of the referendum in Italy. They consider it as a boost to their political stance. Ms. Marocchi in France, so are some of the other countries far right. What do you think about this specific referendum result in relation to the rise of the far right in Europe? And will they be the dominating voice in the coming elections in many countries that we're likely to see?
Well, I think certainly the far right and...
Ms. Marocchi.
Yes? Can you hear me?
Go ahead. Present your answer.
Okay, so I think that for sure the populist far-right forces are gaining ground in Europe. This is undeniable, and it's clear that, as my colleague said, we are witnessing a change in the mind of people. The middle class is losing ground, has been losing ground now for many years, and we need political forces in Europe that are able to interpret and provide answers to people's dissatisfactions with the system. I think that clearly the campaign that was run by Five Star Movement and Lega Nord, the Northern League in Italy, was very much on this, based on this simple populistic messages that are appealing, that clearly they gain traction. But this is also because people lack an alternative. The alternative that is provided is not constructive enough and is not appealing enough. And also I think it's much easier to be destructive than to be constructive.
Right,
so this is the force of the message of these forces in Europe.
To be constructive, I guess that there's one thing that the governments have to be constructive, that is what to do with the economies inside Europe. Italy, for example, the referendum result could have long-term implications, many believe. There has been growing concerns over financial stability in Europe's third largest economy. Take a look at this. Italy's economy is 12% smaller than when the financial crisis began in the year 2008. Banks remain weak, and the country's debt-to-GDP ratio at 133% is the second only to Greece. There is a risk that the failure of a major bank could set off a wider crisis. Repairing the banks could become very, very difficult, as we understand amid particularly political uncertainty. I want to address this question to you, Professor Wang. Even though it is Italy's economy, China is very concerned because China is buying into the European debts, and 1/3 of those European debts are actually from Italy. So when you look at these numbers, attitudes do you think Beijing should have in terms of quite a crisis going on inside Rome?
That's the reason we always supported European integration. We also always supported the certainty, not the uncertainty. Definitely, China, European Union, they are highly economic mutually independent. So we need European Union stable and also member states stable. The banking crisis now is very worried about. So far, the euro jumped and quite stable, not as dangerous as
it went
predicted.
down earlier, but then bounced back again.
Yeah, but the bank, whether the patch test is enough, not its domino effect to other banking. Even the United States also highly concerned about what happened in Italy.
Ms. Marocchi, how much do you think consensus is there for the European Union to work on the banking issues, particularly in these failed banking countries such as Italy? Is there some remedies already besides talking about politics? Briefly.
I think it's very difficult to talk about these remedies without taking into account the political situation, because since the situation is so difficult and moods are swinging very fast, the political risk is it's something to take in high consideration when taking into account when considering economic measures.
Right. Does that mean, Mr.
And I think
Sisi,
that in Brussels there's...
Sorry, I cut you short. Go ahead once again, Ms. Marocchi.
No, sorry, I just meant that in Brussels is aware that these considerations, political and economic, should go hand in hand in this situation.
That does political, economic go hand in hand means no action, or let's just wait for whatever crisis is being unveiled over there, Mr. Sisi. The role of the EU countries, or Brussels, and also what Rome can do itself.
Well, I think at this point it is very important to see what Rome can do itself, because the number you mentioned is very important, because in percentage, yes, the Italian debt is second to Greece, but in total numbers, as total assets, the Italian debt is the biggest, the single biggest in Europe, is the massive. So nobody can save Italy. This is important. Unless Italy gets the courage, gets the stamina itself to push forward, Italy will be in a lot of trouble and could carry a lot of trouble for the rest of Europe. This is the main concern of both the Italian politicians and the European politicians. So this afternoon, the following days, the following hours are extremely important to see what political solution can come out of Rome.
All right. Thank you so much for the three of you at this very critical juncture, I have to say, ladies and gentlemen, to talk to us about your insights, what's going on in Italy, and what it would mean for the European Union as a whole. Wang Yiwei, Francesco Sisi, Tania Marocchi, thank you so much. Really appreciate it, the three of you. You're watching World Insight with me, Tian Wei. Still to come on our program. One phone call that's seen as totally out of line. We will weigh in on Mr. Trump's direct contact with Taiwan's leader.